Summer is here for UCF football, but what does Scott Frost need to get accomplished before fall camp?
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every single day. Joining me as he does every single week is my good friend Andrew Glucov, purveyor of all things UCF, and UCF graduate. Can't state that enough. Andrew, you've been
with
covering
2 degrees.
with 2 degrees from UCF. He's double degreed up on a Friday morning here from UCF. Andrew, on today's show, we're going to talk about the goals that Scott Frost has for this summer for his team in his first year, game one preparations, and what we expect this offense to look like from the jump. Let's start with summer goals. It's the time now. All the summer portal commits should be on campus by now and getting acclimated to their living situations and finding new girlfriends and finding their favorite spot to eat and just getting settled down in Orlando. But most of all, gelling as a team and learning what it means to play football at UCF under Scott Frost. Talk to me about summer goals, man, for Scott Frost here. You know, for veteran coaches, and when I say veteran, I mean in their program, mostly you're trying to catch players up, continue conditioning to get in shape for the season. This is the second chance that they get to do serious conditioning. But summers are about having player-led activities and where leaders are really made for your football team come fall.
Well, you start with spring ball. Spring ball this year was about bringing in a whole new cast of characters. UCF brought in over 40 transfers when it was all said and done. Had to rebuild their roster essentially from scratch. You look at the offense, and if what you're seeing out there is a potential, starting lineup is out there, you're looking at maybe 2 holdovers from last year and 9 new guys that were not on this team in 2024 in your starting lineup. So you look at something brand new. With that being said, the spring was about building the mental aspect of conditioning. Scott Frost plays a quick offense, so you have to be mentally conditioned to handle the speed. Now, the physical condition is a work in progress. That takes a little more time, but your mind goes before the body does. So if you can't mentally get into that mindset, you're never going to be able to play that fast. Because as we know, football is by and large a mental sport more than anything else. Yeah, sure. You got to be big and strong and all that jazz. But if you're not mentally set, it doesn't matter how big and strong you are. You're going to get beat. So that was part of spring ball. And then it was also just talent evaluation, especially with all these transfers coming in, the opportunity for these new players to kind of, acclimate to the campus and start to kind of assert themselves in potential leadership positions, particularly in quarterback. You've got, 3 players out of the 4 on the roster that are transfers from into 2025. The other one is a transfer from 2024. You have a lot of, you have newbies there. So someone's going to have to step up. And that's what spring ball was about. Now it's about team gelling and the players getting to know each other better and allowing those upperclassmen to kind of, step up from a leadership standpoint as a mentor for some of these young freshmen who are coming into, to class, start with the summer session as opposed to early enrollees. And then you're going to get to, the beginning of training camp is where everything gets really locked down. And you're going to separate the ones who are ready to play versus the ones who aren't.
Andrew, you're familiar with this Scott Frost system. You and I both know summers are about also getting in your playbook and understanding conceptually what Scott Frost is trying to do, what your assignments are. How easy of an offense is this to absorb? For guys coming into this system that may not be familiar with the style of football that he's going to want to play offensively.
I would say it's like a over the top complicated system. What it utilizes tempo and speed to be able to keep defenses from subbing in, tiring them out, putting them a little bit, make it a little flat footed. But as we saw from the last time, he also took advantage of versatility. A player like Adrian Killens, who was a freshman in his first season in 2016, small running back, but they also moved him around the field, so that helped avoid the need for substitutions, which allowed more tempo. So you could have a simple playbook, but move guys around, and by playing with that speed, not allow the defense to substitute players. Guys are going to get tired. As we know, there's been talks about what to do with players who fake injuries to stop the clock. I call it the Pat Narduzzi rule because Pitt coach Pat Narduzzi is notoriously known for having players fake injuries to stop the clock. Ironically, one of UCF's transfers is from Pitt, and Sincere Edwards, a really talented defensive end that UCF nearly nabbed last year. You missed out on him. He ended up flipping over to Pitt, but realized the error of his ways and came back to the state of Florida. But overall, you have to do certain ththings well. You have to, be in great condition to be able to play with this speed. You have to have a good sense of timing because that offensive lineman, you got to have that timing cadence. You have to have, from a quarterback standpoint, you have to have quick vision. You have to go through those progressions pretty quick, not be afraid to tuck it and run to keep it moving, but have enough touch to make those passes because you're going to open up those deep routes when you make these players, these defensive players tired by just kind of pushing on them. And then when they're starting to drop back, you go to the short game. If he does anything like he did in 2016, 2017, this could work out real well. But as we know, you can only work with the talent that you have. This is not the exact players that he would want on his team. But London wasn't built in a day. This isn't like him inheriting the team that he got in 2016, which was coming off a winless season in 2015, and it was the most talented winless team you've ever seen. Number of those guys went to the NFL. It was actually a really good team. They just, the rot came from the top. You had a head coach that was wanted that was done. He checked out, and the team followed him. And when you have no leadership up there, it fell apart. It's why, seeing the improvement from 0 wins to 6 wins from 2015 to 2016 just shows that if you have a coach that, actually gives a damn at that point, good things can happen. And, so I expect it to keep not overly complicated just because there's so many new faces. I'm expecting things to get more complicated as we go further into his tenure, but pretty simple out the gate.
Yeah, look, the work done in the summer hopefully will set them up for game one. We're going to talk about that week 1 preparation here on Locked on UCF right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked on UCF is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you just stop managing your money and start building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Andrew, Jacksonville State, week 1, they've got to get ready for them August the 28th. That's a Thursday kickoff. I want to talk about that Thursday kickoff because we got some high-profile games on the 29th, which is a Friday. And obviously, Saturday will be a busy day for the first week of college football. But is this Thursday kickoff how does that mess with their week one preparation here? Because it's week one, does it matter at all that they're playing on a Thursday, or what are your thoughts on this?
No, I don't think this is something UCF's done for a number of years. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. The view was they don't want to mess with people's Labor Day weekends. I'll tell you one thing: you are messing with my Labor Day weekend by putting it on a Thursday. I want it on a Saturday. I want it on my Labor Day weekend. But no, this is nothing new. This is expected at this point. I mean, I've lost count how many years in a row that they've opened on a Thursday, and much to my own chagrin. But the truth is, because it's so far ahead, I don't think it makes a difference at all, because you can still game plan for it. It's not a short week. You're still going to have plenty of time in training camp. And while usually it's against a softer team, usually 2021 was not so soft. The philosophy here is going into this game is going to be go through the motions of the stuff that they learn, see what's working, see what's not working, and if you can get ahead, bring in other guys so you can evaluate. You got the 4-game, red shirt rule. This is going to be probably one that's going to be utilized. Jacksonville State had a good year last year, but they lost the bulk of their talent and their head coach. Rich Rodriguez left. He's over at West Virginia, and a lot of the players left too. So this is a team that's a shell of its former self. Expectations are not overly high for Jacksonville State, which is for OG fans that have been around a long time prior to Conference USA. Jacksonville State was an old member of the Atlantic Sun with UCF. So for like myself, who were there in those dark days, this is a bit of almost, you could say, a bit of a homecoming, in the fact that UCF and them were never football rivals, because the A-Sun was not a football conference. The fact that the two schools are meeting again as FBS members is a throwback to the days when they were Division I members of the Atlantic Sun together.
Yeah. Jacksonville State game 1 on a Thursday, Andrew. I'm not a big fan of the Thursday game either. But what do we learn about UCF football potentially versus Jacksonville State? Is this a game that you come away with a sense of what kind of football team this is? Or is it just a chance to get warmed up to playing football, essentially? This is a game certainly that UCF should win, no doubt. But I think that it'll be more about how do they look and how fluid does the offense go, and can they execute against a team like Jacksonville State? If they can't, maybe that tells you a little bit about how much longer it's going to take for Scott Frost to kind of establish his way of doing things.
Well, I think you're going to see kind of the tip of the playbook here. You're going to see just a little bit, not too much flashy stuff. They're going to look at mechanics. Are they doing the fundamental things correctly? If not, what can we do to correct those? Because the following game is against FCS North Carolina A&T, which is also a team that has struggled mightily, in the last few years, and UCF's expected to run that one through pretty easily too. So they'll have another chance to kind of work things out and tune things up, because then the season really gets going the following week against North Carolina. So I think you're going to see a degree of conservatism out of the playbook. Can you do these certain things well? We're going to look at fundamentals. Is the technique in the offensive line looking good? How are rotations looking? Are we making good reads? Are we going through our progressions? Those are the things that Scott Frost is going to have to visualize as this is going through. What am I seeing? How are we adapting to what's being presented to us, and how are we creating misdirection to fool our opponents? Those are the questions that he's going to be asking as this game's going on. And because Jacksonville State is not expected to be a very strong team, he's allowed to focus a little bit more on those details than the real heavy details of a highly competitive game.
Yeah, look, week one certainly will be interesting. I'm going to be looking forward to seeing what they put on the field. Speaking of which, what will a Scott Frost system look like at UCF this go round? The game has evolved. Has Scott Frost evolved? We'll talk about that next on Locked On UCF. What will it look like in game one? What will it look like in general in year one? Talk to me about the Scott Frost system. Again, you covered this, and I'm leaning heavily on your expertise here in terms of what Scott Frost is going to try to do, what it's going to look like. You talked in the first segment about the conditioning necessary for a system like this, but what kind of balance of run to pass will we see? Before we started recording, we talked about potentially some players, climbing the depth chart, in the run game, but do they project to keep the ball on the ground, aim for 50-50? What has been the balance when it's been most successful under Scott Frost?
Scott Frost was kind of like a 60-40 guy. He didn't have to throw the ball as many times because he created so many mismatches, but he had a quarterback in McKenzie Milton who had, his freshman year, he struggled a little bit and mechanics needed work. He pushed the ball. It caused turnovers and whatnot. But in the second year, he kind of figured it out, and he had a very good deep touch. Not quite to the level of Dylan Gabriel did, after Frost left, but still had very good deep touch and had great receivers. Now, UCF's not going to have the receivers compared to what McKenzie Milton had in his run, a Traquan Smith, a Jordan Akins, a Dredrick Snelson, a very talented group there versus, Gabriel Davis. I mean, you're talking lots of talent there. You're not going to get that in this group. So, I think the expectations going to be a little more muted. Again, as I said, that 2015 squad is the most talented winless team you will ever find, period. And I'll stand behind that because it was an incredibly talented group that just had no leadership. So, these group, the new system, a lot of transfers, a lot of, 1 year rentals, maybe guys with 2 years eligibility, but you're seeing a very different, more mercenary style players, basically, they're getting paid to come. So it's, the situation has changed. He's been out of the game for a while, Frost. So he's been leaning heavily on the assistants who have been in the game, consistently and are used to that new system. So I think he'll be able to adapt, from a call play standpoint. I mean, it's probably close to 50-50. And it really depends on how ahead UCF gets. The further they get ahead, the more you'll see more running game. Just to, be a little more conservative, not try to completely run the score because, he's not a disrespectful coach. And so he's looking for certain things. He wants to see the execution and all that, but his goal is not to run up the score against an outmatched opponent. So if they jump ahead and they're very efficient, you'll see the running game creep up more and more the percent. But I mean, you're probably going to be 55-45 before, things kind of, if the game gets lopsided before it really changes over. But I expect to be as close to 50-50 as possible so he can evaluate how these different pieces of the offense operate ahead of the meat of the season.
Andrew, I have to believe that a factor in what this will look like and what that run pass balance will look like will depend heavily on who plays quarterback and how much of that system Scott Frost feels like they have a handle on. Now, we've got some different candidates for QB1 in Tayven, Jackson, Cam Fancher, and Jacurri Brown. There were reports coming out of camp that Jacurri Brown looked better than most people. Some people have written him off, but he feels supremely confident in his ability to be able to go out there and compete with the guys that have been brought in. If the QB gets it, could we see them open it up after a few games, or maybe even against North Carolina?
Well, they're going to have to at some point. The style of Frost is a spread offense with a tempo. You don't be surprised to see routine plays starting around 20 seconds on the play clock. I mean, they move quick, and obviously when there's incompletions, you can slow down. But like when they need to move, they're going to, and that's going to throw that defense off. And that's really where you need that quarterback with the deep touch, because that's where you get that move, that stutter step, and go down, deep down the sideline, get that nice outside shoulder, deep pass for a large gain. I expect, whoever ends up under center, and logically, Tayven Jackson is the predicted guy. Until we start really seeing how training camp breaks apart, it could change. But I think Tayven Jackson is going to be the guy. He's the one who was brought in specifically by Scott Frost for this team. He's a more accurate passer than Jacurri Brown. You don't necessarily need the legs in Scott Frost's offense. It comes in handy and it's useful. But if you can move the ball well enough, you can make your reads quick enough. You can use the pocket. As long as everything doesn't break down. But I'll tell you one thing. Thursday night against Jacksonville State in the newly named Acrisure Bounce House.
All right.
The name has officially changed. No longer FBC Mortgage Stadium. It is now the Acrisure Bounce House. The Bounce House, is finally an official part of a named stadium. It was kind of used when there was no sponsorship, but UCF's leaning into that. Between the atmosphere the fans can create and the product they can build can really build some confidence. Because remember, the first 3 games of the season are all at home. UCF's got a tough home field advantage. That stadium gets loud for its size. That steel bowl does reflect sound, and it can get very loud when they need to. So it also can be very supportive. These players are going to need that.
Yeah, they're definitely going to need that for sure. It's going to be fun to watch here this season in Scott Frost's first season back at UCF. Andrew Glucov, I want to thank you for joining me as always. Guys, that's it for another great edition of Locked On UCF. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of every day. For your second listen, go check out The Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes in college football landscape. Find The Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. You can find us here tomorrow on Locked On UCF.